reproductive technologies are so quickly developing and changing, and so profoundly consequential for society, these issues do also get treated in many artistic media. So I guess there's the crossover for you. But I wanted to begin, at Piero's recommendation, telling you just a little bit about the Center for Genetics and Society. The first thing to say is that our office is directly across the street from here. So you're welcome to come by at any time, and it was very convenient to come. And our mission statement is that we work for responsible uses and effective social governance of human genetic and reproductive technology. We talk about building a new biopolitics, and what we mean by that is that we think that these fast-developing and profoundly consequential practices and technologies should be assessed through a lens, through a perspective that really does focus on social justice, human rights, and the public interest. And that's not really a lens that's often brought to these technologies. So I hope you'll find it fresh. The way we do this is through several approaches. We are active in trying to bring our perspective into the media, so we do a lot of talking to reporters, we write articles and op-eds, we have the whole suite of online things that you have to do these days. We also put a lot of effort into what we call building an advocacy network. So what we found, we've been around for about 12 years, and it was lonelier at the beginning, but even now, there are a lot of scholars and there are scattered advocates and people in the policy world and creative artists and others who are very concerned about the issues that we're concerned with and these new technologies, biotechnologies. But they often don't even know each other. Sometimes they don't even know of each other's work. So we see ourselves in the kind of early days of what we think is going to become a larger social effort, maybe even a social movement. And sometimes we compare it to the state of things in what we now call the environmental movement before the first Earth Day, before Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. So there were certainly concerns in many areas. There were concerns about wilderness preservation and wildlife and even toxic chemicals and urban blight, but there was no overarching umbrella really. There was, preservationism of John Muir and conservationism of Pinchot, but there was no environmentalism as we know it today. We think we're in that kind of prehistory almost of a new biopolitics, and so that's why we focus a lot on finding people who are doing work on this already or are already concerned about it and who are leaders in their fields. We also look for opportunities to do advocacy-oriented research, so research that really can inform our perspective and so that we get it right, basically. And the fourth thing is selectively we do public policy interventions. We have been active at the state, national, and even at the UN and international levels, but we are, because we're a small organization, very selective about the things we take on. So that's what we do. So I want to start here. I hope to take you on a kind of a tour of all the issues, but I'm going to be selective in that as well. And this one is something that I thought a lot of people might be familiar with, and it's about the Supreme Court decision this past summer, a unanimous decision that human genes are not eligible to be patented. So can I just ask, how many people are aware of that case? So everyone is aware of that case, great. Okay, so...
Is that human genes only? What about animal genes?
The case was human genes, and it was actually limited to human genes as they are found in the body. So the Supreme Court did not rule on cDNA, and the interpretation of that is still happening now.
What about genes that were modified?
Good and very interesting question. The basic legal argument was that patent law says that you can't patent a product of nature. So that was the basis, the legal basis for the argument. So this is good. So everyone knows about it, so I'll just kind of breeze through what I wanted to say about it. I did want to go back and do a little bit of reminding you of history. This is front page of a newspaper from 1955, and it was on the day that it was announced that the vaccine against polio actually was effective after many years of public interest, intense public interest in it. And when this announcement came, it was this amazing occasion. It was a celebration nationwide with the church bells ringing and the people dancing in the streets, the whole shebang, sirens blowing, everything. And everybody knew about it. I mean, those were, the days when people's attention could more easily be focused on one thing. But this was something that had been avidly followed by the public for many years. And, there were the bottles in the supermarket where you would put your pennies and nickels. And it was said that more people, a Gallup poll found in 1954 that more people knew about the field trials for the vaccine for polio than could tell you what the full name of the president of the day was, Dwight Eisenhower. So the reason I'm going back here is because of an interesting comment that Dr. Salk made when he was interviewed that night by Edward R. Murrow. He was interviewed live on See It Now, and Murrow asked him, so, who owns the patent on this vaccine? And Salk's reply was, well, the people, I would say. There's no patent. Could you patent the sun? So that was his mindset in the mid-50s, right? Fast forward a few decades, and that attitude became seen as completely quaint, completely archaic. Who would think of such a thing? And it is true that today patents are part of the routine for biotechnology and many other, and probably all other kinds of research. But now, because of the Supreme Court decision, you cannot patent human genes, at least as they exist in the body. So what I want to talk about is the way that conversation kind of developed. And this was the lawsuit, just to remind you, it was argued by the ACLU and the Public Patent Foundation, and it was on behalf of a bunch of plaintiffs. They were plaintiffs representing scientific organizations of 150,000 researchers. There were women's health organizations. There were genetic counselors and breast cancer patients. And it really was a case unlike any other patent cases, because it wasn't one company suing another for a patent, which is what 99.9% of patent issues that wind up in court are about. This was really this challenge to the validity and constitutionality of human gene patents in general. So the ACLU, in its public promotional materials, sometimes use this kind of rhetoric: do not patent my genes. And that kind of hands off my genes, they belong to me, was, I think, a large strain of the discourse and the rhetoric around it. But going back here, there was a message that was subtly, but I think importantly different: the fight to take back our genes. So that difference between my genes and our genes, I think, is something that we want to interrogate more. I think it makes a difference whether you think that, and this is a statement that could apply to many kinds of scientific research, how you think scientific research should benefit by and be influenced by the public, and how much you think that it should be for the benefit of and governed by the market. And that's a tension that I want to come back to in a lot of the things I say. In fact, the idea that the human genome is part of a commons, that's something that's collectively owned, that has been asserted by several international bodies, including UNESCO, the World Medical Association, and the Human Genome Organization. All of them have said that the human genome is part of the common heritage of humanity. And I think that, to me, that's a compelling and attractive idea. And then, you obviously have to say, okay, what does it mean in the real world? And I definitely want to acknowledge that. But I think that the lawsuit, the ACLU lawsuit against Myriad, helped a little bit to start this kind of discussion. And I think that's a good thing, because I think that very often discussions about these technologies tend to get narrowed, and they tend to focus on important issues, but narrow issues. So issues like, hi, welcome. technical concerns about, what is the legal status of patents? What are the environmental impacts of synthetic biology? What are the health risks of efforts to clone human beings? Now, these are all super important questions, as are procedural questions, things about informed consent, about disclosure of conflicts of interest. All those things are really important to get right. But I think that too often what happens is that the focus is completely on those kind of procedural and technical questions, and we miss the social questions. So I'm going to move off gene patents now.
Who was the respondent?
I'm sorry, who asked that?
Who was the respondent?
Who was the lawsuit against? Myriad Genetics, and it was about the BRCA1 and 2 genes. Yeah, we can talk more about that. Okay, so now we want to move to direct-to-consumer gene tests, and that's also been in the news lately. So how many people are aware of the FDA warning letter to the company 23andMe? Most people. So this happened a couple weeks ago. And this is something, any of these things are things we could talk for 20 hours about. So just a gloss on that one as well. This really brings up the tension between public policy and the market, and between the impulse that many people have, which is, it's my genes, it's my genetic information. You have no right, FDA, to restrict my ability to get that information. And among the sort of, techno part of the blogosphere, that was definitely the overwhelming sentiment. But there were a lot of other people who said, and I was one of them, look, they're making health claims. The FDA considers this a medical device. If we don't have some kind of public policy about these health claims and these medical devices, then we're going to be back in the snake oil age. And in fact, I think this is an area where, again, a look at the social values that are at stake would bring an additional lens on it. So these claims about health, first of all, there are some interesting procedural things. 23andMe took the position that the FDA, they were cooperating with the FDA. And they went along doing this, and the FDA enumerated, I think, 14 face-to-face meetings, dozens of phone calls, email exchanges. And then the company stopped communicating with the FDA last spring, and a month or so later, launched this massive television campaign, multi-million-dollar television campaign, in which they made completely clear, strong claims that this product was a medical product and it was going to tell you about your health. So what do we do with that? Does the public agency that's mandated to protect the public health have a right to regulate this? I think they do.
It's false advertisement.
It's a false
That's
advertisement.
how they can get them.
Yeah. And that might be how it turns out, that they have to scale back their health claims. And that's what some of the other direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies have done. But there's some other issues going on here, too. There's a number, but I'm just going to mention one. And that's the misleading claims thing about what genes can predict. Now, I want to start by saying, because I know I have to start by saying this, that genetic testing is a really amazing development. And there are many instances in which it's going to save lives and it's going to tell you important things about your health. But it's not the way we thought it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So in, I think it was the summer of 2010, the Government Accountability Office did a study, and they sent saliva from the same person to a number of these different direct-to-consumer gene testing companies. And guess what? They got back conflicting results in a number of cases. Craig Venter did the same thing. He did it with 5 people, and he sent it to a bunch of people. And he said there were problems in about half the cases. Now, as someone said, if there was a doctor who got it right half the time, something's wrong there. So the company is making claims that are not scientifically supportable. And some people would say, well, it's because it's too soon. We haven't done enough studies. We haven't looked at enough genetic samples from enough people and, run the algorithms and, but we'll learn. There'll be more studies, we'll get more robust correlations, but we'll learn. Maybe that's still the case, but I am starting to think it's not that it's too soon to make claims about the health benefits of direct-to-consumer genetic testing. It's too late to make those claims. And the reason I say that is because in recent years, more and more what we're learning, what we're seeing, is that even though genes are highly predictive for, some devastating but fortunately much more rare diseases like Huntington's, etc., and a few inheritable cancers, the BRCA1 and 2 genes is the poster child of there, that for common complex diseases, we're not going to be able to read them off the gene sequence. We're learning more about gene regulation, about epigenetics, about how environmental influences and biological influences that are non-genetic are in communication with gene expression. And I think what we're going to see is that for healthy people who want to know about their risk of common complex diseases, they're going to learn more by getting on the bathroom scale than they are by getting a genetic test. And when they do get a genetic test, they're going to need a lot of help, not because ordinary people aren't smart, but because it's so complicated. We are going to need to be guided through the interpretations because they're that complicated. And I think that's going to continue to be true. So I think that this is a conversation that I'm glad is happening, this kerfuffle about the FDA and 23andMe. And I'd like to see it address some of these other questions. I also wanted to point out that a lot of these companies, the names kind of reveal something about what I'm trying to put out about a tension between individual freedom, autonomy, focus, and social focus. 23andMe. And if I could show you their commercial, you would see it's almost like a parody of this. There's a place in the commercial where it says 23andMe, me. So it's really about thinking that your health is in your genes. It's about you, your single body, and it's your responsibility. And there's a certain way in which that is certainly true. But if we don't also say that our health is about the society, about social conditions, about environmental conditions, about the healthcare system, we're missing the boat, I would say. So, when did I start, Piero?
You have 1 more minute.
1 more minute. What do I do with that? Okay.
Sorry,
2:15. 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, this is really going to be a whirlwind tour. So 23andMe, after everything negative I've said about them, they're one of the responsible direct-to-consumer genetic test companies. They're the companies that are advertising to assess your athletic predispositions. There's this company, My Gene Profile, the Inborn Talent Genetic Test. There's and these tests are going to grow in their application. This new kind of fetal gene test that's going to be done in early pregnancy can tell you when you're like 9-10 weeks pregnant. They've shown in principle that they can get the complete fetal genetic sequence. What our parents can do when they're told that the 10-week-old fetus has got a 32% higher risk of heart disease and a 51% lower risk of colon cancer. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but it's something we ought to be talking about. I was going to tell you a little bit about DNA police databases, which, again, I want them. I want police to be able to catch people who do bad things with genetic sampling and DNA forensic techniques, but I don't think that we should be putting in these huge, massive databases genetics samples from people who were never charged with a crime when they're convicted of a crime. In California, there's another lawsuit going on right now that's going to determine the constitutionality of that. We passed an initiative that said that the police are not only able, but required, mandated, to collect spit samples for DNA tests from anyone who's picked up. Well, I'm just going to go through these to show you the kinds of things that I think are also up for grabs in these with these new technologies, race and genetics. who's seen the movie Gattaca? Everyone's seen the movie Gattaca. We could find ourselves in a Gattaca world, I believe, and there's some people who want to go there. And here's a whole bunch of other issues that we deal with, and I think it makes the case that we need a new biopolitics, and I would like it to come from this social perspective. I think we have some very difficult balancing acts to do. We have to think about where is public policy appropriate and where do we let the market do as it will. Well, we versus me, there's a wonderful book called We Medicine versus Me Medicine that takes up some of the issues about direct-to-consumer genetic testing and other topics. And then, where do we find the sort of, sensibility balance between a precautionary approach and technological enthusiasm? And how do we encourage widespread public discussion of all these things? So I will end with this slide, which just shows you some of the things that you can sign up for at our website. We've got the whole schmear, the newsletter, the Twitter feed, the Facebook, the blog, and it's all accessible through geneticsandSociety.org. So thanks.